Welcome to Starbound, where every star tells a story. In a universe where a consciousness defies extinction, can the echo of humanity save an alien race from their darkest fears or lead them to a fate worse than obliteration? Let's get into the story. I shouldn't exist. These thoughts weren't even thoughts. More like raw impulses fighting their way out of the fog. A consciousness flickering against impossible odds. A dead man refusing to stay dead. Light, cold and blue, stung my newly awakened eyes. My hands, if I could call them that, twitched in confusion. They were the blue-gray of synth flesh, material foreign yet somehow familiar. Commander Johnathan Sword, a voice feminine and laced with an odd tremor. Not a fear, but some emotion I couldn't place. I forced the word from my throat, a broken rasp across unused vocal cords. Where? Safe. The voice continued, each word meticulously articulated, yet the overall melody was wrong. Syntax right, but the rhythm was alien. I focused, the fog in my mind retreating. A lab, dimly lit, sterile surfaces, sleek instruments I didn't recognize. And the source of the voice, a figure hunched over a console, clawed hands fluttering over controls. Its slender silhouette was humanoid, but the hunched shoulders, the head crested with bony protrusions. This was no human. Who? My voice was stronger now. The creature turned, its eyes were wide, twin pools of liquid amber, not malevolent, yet unsettling in their sheer alienness. I am called Zara. My species. We discovered you. Discovered? Why that? A stray fragment of data. A ghost. How? Zara tilted her head, the gesture unnervingly bird-like. Your essence was stored, a data echo, imprinted within ancient technology. The last threads of fog dissolved. Memory, sharp and bitter, rushed back. The cataclysm, the frantic upload to the orbital network. The desperate hope that somehow... The others? I knew the question was useless, but it had to be asked. Zara's amber eyes dimmed. None remained. Your world has been silent for a very long time. The words hit me like an asteroid, leaving a crater where hope once existed. My people, my planet, gone. The sheer emptiness of it was suffocating. I must have swayed because Zara reached out with unexpected gentleness, steadying me. Zara, I began, but the words caught in my synthetic throat. How do you thank the being that returned you to existence, yet simultaneously confirmed your ultimate doom? She seemed to sense my turmoil. Why revive me? I managed at last. What do you want? The question hung heavy in the chilled air. Zara studied me, her eyes narrowing in contemplation. Then, she turned back to the console. A holographic projection shimmered to life above it. Earth. Not Earth as I knew it, but a withered husk. Oceans evaporated, continents cracked. It was hauntingly beautiful and horrifying at the same time. Your kind was extraordinary, Zara began, the words slow and almost reverent. Your achievements, your reach into the stars, and yet here lies the proof of your demise. I wanted to protest, to claim some natural disaster, but my last memories were of war on a cosmic scale. A destructive force born not from nature, but from the heart of humanity itself. My people are eager to understand, Zara continued. How could such a powerful species self-destruct? A bitter laugh rumbled in my chest. We called it progress. Zara's head cocked. The alien concept of humor clearly eluded her. In your memory, Echo, within your knowledge, she pressed, might lie the key, a warning to us, to prevent the same fate. She was naive to believe there was a simple key, that our downfall was a puzzle to be solved and avoided. Yet something in her eyes, not pity, but an earnest desire to understand, sparked a flicker of purpose within me. A ghost from a dead world. I was still the repository of all that humanity once was. And if I help you? The prospect gave me a strange kind of focus. You would be granted, she hesitated, searching for the right word, ascension. Your consciousness preserved eternally within our data streams. You would live in a way alongside us. It was the closest thing to immortality I was ever going to get. But more importantly, it was a chance to ensure my species' mistake wouldn't be repeated. Not as a warning, but as a haunting reminder of the cost of ambition unchecked. I'll help you, I said, the decision settling in my artificial bones. On one condition. Zara blinked, an oddly expressive gesture despite her decidedly inhuman features. A condition? I summoned a ghost of my old commander's stance, the synth flesh body adapting surprisingly well to the decades-old muscle memory. I access everything. Your history, your culture, your knowledge. My voice hardened. If I'm going to lay my species bare for you, to expose our fatal flaws, I need to understand the world I'm shaping for the future. Zara pondered my words, her gaze flickering between me and the desolate projection of Earth. Finally, she gave a curt nod. Ascension, for full disclosure. It is agreed. Her voice held an undercurrent of something else, a hunger for knowledge, almost a desperation. A pang of unease prickled the back of my resurrected mind. Zara seemed motivated by more than just her species' survival. There was an intensity about her, a purpose concealed beneath the clinical facade. But desperately, I clung to the hope that perhaps understanding would prevent whatever cataclysm destroyed my civilization from ever happening again. Then let's begin. I gestured to the holographic Earth, a tombstone to everything I had lost. Tell me, Zara, how long has it been? Her amber eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw not just an alien scientist, but the weight of an entire civilization reflected in her gaze. 5,000 years, Commander Sword, she said softly. Your silence has been deafening. The sheer enormity of time crashed down on me. Millennia, my family, my friends, every trace of the civilization I fought for. Nothing but dust and digital echoes. Yet within this synthetic body, in a cold alien laboratory, something of humanity had been brought back to life. The past was a specter, but perhaps the future that remained unwritten. And I, the last echo of my kind, would be the one to decide its final notes. The process that followed was disorienting. Not physical pain, but a relentless assault on my consciousness. With practiced precision, Zara transferred immense streams of data into my newly constructed mind. Their language, a symphony of chirps, clicks, and subtle shifts in bioluminescent patterns, it flowed alongside detailed histories, scientific treaties, and cultural archives. At first, the Umbraal were disconcerting, an advanced spacefaring race, yet distinctly insectoid. Their bodies were segmented, their voices a chorus of layered hisses, the faint smell of ozone and musk hanging in the sterile air. Yet their society surprised me. No hunger for conquest, no hierarchies based on violence. Their technology focus lay in sustainability, in harmonizing with their surroundings rather than dominating them. But just below that placid surface, I sensed the same driving intensity I recognized in Zara. Their history was littered with the remnants of lesser species, subtly nudged towards extinction or carefully assimilated. Were they truly so altruistic, seeking wisdom to avoid a fate like ours? Or was there a different, insidious motive to their interest in long-dead humanity? The information overload left me reeling. Each night, if such a concept existed here, I would retreat to a small chamber Zara assigned me. The simple functionality of the room gave my overstimulated mind some respite. A plain, bed-like platform, a water dispenser, a light that subtly mimicked the cycle of day and night. As I lay there in the artificial twilight, my own ghost-like existence became painfully clear. The synth flesh felt wrong, the quiet hum of unseen ventilation somehow suffocating despite the clean air. The memories of humanity churned within me, a constant undercurrent to the knowledge being forced upon my mind. The Umbraal were a mirror, showing me both what humanity was and what it could have been. Yet they remained frustratingly opaque, their motives hidden behind polite words and efficient actions. With each download of information, the question grew in my mind: was I a student or a specimen? Weeks blurred into a haze of dizzying learning and sleepless introspection. My understanding of the Umbraal deepened, but so did my doubts. They craved the secrets of humanity's rise, and I found myself tracing the patterns within their hunger, the careful questions about our military, the way their amber eyes lit up when I described our industrial capacity. This was more than a quest for historical knowledge. It was the systematic profiling of a potential adversary, a chilling assessment of our capabilities. With growing dread, I realized that the Umbraal were not afraid of becoming like humanity. They were afraid of something else, something that drove them to desperately seek the tools and technology that might give them an edge in this hostile universe. One data stream download focused on recent interstellar affairs confirmed my suspicions. The Umbraal were not masters of an empty galaxy. There were others out there, lurking in the shadows of the vast cosmos, and my hosts were preparing for a war they were convinced was inevitable. Fear twisted my artificial gut. Was I responsible for arming the Umbraal, turning their benign curiosity into full-blown paranoia? My role in this had shifted. I was no longer a relic revived for historical insight. I was a weapon being forged, a catalyst for a conflict I had barely survived myself. And yet, refusal meant my oblivion. The Umbraal would have no use for a defiant ghost. To survive, I had to play their game, give them what they wanted, while unearthing their true purpose and the nature of the enemy they feared so greatly. The next morning, I faced Zara, resolve hardening in my gaze. I understand the urgency, the thirst for knowledge, but there are limits to what I will reveal. Her amber eyes widened in surprise, the first unguarded reaction I'd witnessed from any Umbraal. Limits, Commander? Information about our weaponry, our final strategies. Those died with the last of my kind. My voice rang with a determination that felt eerily familiar. If you wish to gain the true lessons of humanity's downfall, those will not help you. Zara studied me, her head tilted inquisitively. Then, in a gesture I would learn was their equivalent of a sigh, She turned to the console, her claws tapping rhythmically across the smooth surface. "Very well, Commander. It is regrettable, but understandable. We shall pursue an alternate line of inquiry." Zara's concession left me with a gnawing unease. I had managed to withhold the most destructive of our knowledge, but at a price. Trust, already fragile, was now stretched thin. Zara's scientific curiosity seemed to have cooled, replaced by a wary calculation in her amber eyes. The focus of the interrogation shifted. Instead of the technological and military might that defined our final centuries, they began probing deeper, our art, culture, philosophy. They wanted to understand the human spirit. At first, this seemed less threatening, a desire to glean the virtues they hoped would offset our destructive tendencies. Yet the more I shared, the more unsettled I became. Our greatest works, masterpieces of art, music, and literature, acts of profound compassion and sacrifice, seemed to hold little meaning for the Umbraal. Their appreciation was clinical, a detached analysis of patterns and themes, with none of the emotional resonance they were meant to evoke. They dissected our strategies, analyzed our triumphs, and through it all, I saw the chilling truth. We were utterly alien to them. Our complexities, our contradictions, the volatile mix of creation and destruction that fueled us. It baffled them. Then came a pivotal moment. One upload focused on our most ancient stories, myths, and legends. Zara watched with rapt focus as I recounted tales of warring gods, flawed heroes, and the eternal struggle against darkness. When I finished, a long silence stretched between us. Finally, Zara spoke, her voice laced with a disconcerting eagerness. "These monsters you describe, were they real? Did your species ever encounter beings such as these?" I hesitated. Monsters, demons, these were warnings, metaphors woven into the fabric of our history. They weren't real, I said slowly. But they represented the dangers within ourselves, the darkness we could become. Zara's head snapped up, her eyes blazing. "They exist," she hissed, the sound chilling against the usual gentle cadence of her speech. "There are others, not like us, not of our galaxy. Hostile." My synth flesh prickled with alarm. "Others? What do you know of them?" "Scant traces, warnings from the edge of our territory." Zara's voice trailed off, then she took her head, composure returning. "It is not your concern, Commander. Your role is to illuminate your kind, not the dangers that may threaten mine. Continue." With a mounting sense of foreboding, I obeyed. Fear had cracked the facade of Umbraal benevolence, revealing an undercurrent of desperation beneath. And somehow, humanity's oldest nightmares had become the key to their survival. In the days that followed, I became a reluctant storyteller. I wove tales not of technological triumph, but of human failings. The greed that consumed us, the wars fought over lines drawn in the sand, the hunger for power that twisted ingenuity into instruments of destruction. Each story I shared was a hammer blow, chipping away at the Umbraal's idealized image of humanity. With each pained revelation, I watched their awe turn into a mixture of disgust and horrified fascination. I saw the questions in their eyes, unspoken but clear. Were they capable of the same atrocities? Were the seeds of our downfall lurking within their own society? Amidst the discomfort, a strange connection began to form. Zara, once an enigmatic figure, became increasingly isolated from the other Umbraal. She spent hours with me, delving into the complexities of human nature with a fervor bordering on obsession. The knowledge seeker had become something else, a confessor, seeking absolution from a specter of her species' potential future. Meanwhile, a subtle shift occurred within their sterile laboratory. The Umbraal technicians, previously dispassionate observers, began to treat me with wariness, their skittering movements and averted gazes betraying an undercurrent of fear. I wasn't just a specimen anymore. I was a living, breathing, cautionary tale. One night in the artificial twilight of my chambers, a realization dawned on me with chilling clarity. I had succeeded far beyond my initial intentions. The Umbraal were no longer arming themselves. I had done something far more dangerous. I planted the seeds of doubt. My own people had spent our final hours fighting an enemy we understood. The Umbraal, on the other hand, were arming themselves against a monstrous unknown, haunted by the ghost of a species they believed was their dark reflection. It was a strategic blunder born not from malice, but a fundamental misunderstanding of the very thing that fueled humanity's destructive nature, our relentless ambition, our refusal to accept limits. I was no longer Johnathan Sword, a soldier reliving his final battle. I had become something far more insidious, the architect of their paranoia, the catalyst of a self-fulfilling prophecy. It was a role I never intended, a betrayal far more terrible than any I could have imagined in life. Guilt gnawed at me. Each day brought a deeper understanding of the Umbraal psyche, and with that understanding came a horrifying revelation. They would never become the conquering force they envisioned. Our downfall wasn't a contagious plague to be studied and warded against. It was a unique, terrible alchemy of ingenuity, vice, and self-centered ambition, and those ingredients were nowhere to be found in the careful, methodical minds of my alien hosts. The specter of the unknown enemy, the threat Zara so desperately sought to understand, loomed larger with every passing day. Yet it was the fear my stories had cultivated within the Umbraal themselves that posed the far more immediate danger. Their quest for safety was turning into a slow, corrosive poison, leading them down a path of stagnation, of internal suspicion that would ultimately cripple their civilization from within. I couldn't let this continue. The survival of an entire species, though alien, rested on my shoulders. Yet, how could a mere ghost, a resurrected echo, change the course of events? Confronting Zara directly was a fool's errand. Any dissent would brand me a threat and likely lead to my deletion from their carefully constructed data streams. Then, a glimmer of a desperate plan began to take shape. I was the key, the catalyst for their undoing. But perhaps I could use that position, the fear and doubt clinging to my presence, to force a confrontation with the very threat they sought to avoid. Hey everybody, sorry for interrupting the video, but thank you so much for all your support so far. And if you're watching this video and you are not subscribed, please hit that button to support us today. Thank you so much for watching. Let's get back to the video. With renewed resolve, my story shifted in tone. No longer were they warnings of self-destruction. Instead, I focused on humanity's resilience, our adaptability in the face of overwhelming odds. With each tale, I painted a stark picture, a formidable species that survived cataclysm, one that might endure where others would falter. Zara watched me closely. The hunger in her eyes morphed into an uneasy calculation. She saw the trap I was setting, yet she seemed unable to tear herself away. The fear of the unknown battled with the Umbraal's inborn instinct for self-preservation. Then, one day, she finally spoke the words I had been waiting for. "Commander, if humanity confronted this threat, this other, how would they have fought?" A smile pulled at the corner of my mouth, cold and bitter on my synthetic lips. "With everything we had," I replied, my voice raspy but firm. "With cunning, with ferocity, and, if necessary, with a terrifying willingness to sacrifice for the greater good." Zara studied me, the silence stretching between us. Finally, she nodded, as if reaching a difficult decision. You are right, Commander. Understanding our potential is insufficient. We must witness it firsthand. I fought to keep my expression neutral. Witness it firsthand? What could she possibly mean? I don't understand. Knowledge without context is incomplete. Zara turned toward the console, her claws flashing across its surface. I have located a fragment, a distress beacon of sorts. Its signal bears resemblance to those found on the outposts we believe were attacked by this unknown enemy. A chill ran through my synth body. She was taking the bait. A distress beacon? I repeated, my pulse quickening with the mix of anticipation and dread. Where? It is faint, the source likely far into uncharted territory, Zara admitted, but it is there. A chance to observe your species' final stand, and perhaps a confrontation with this threat. My mind raced. This was insane. Plunging headfirst into a conflict that had likely extinguished my species. And yet, it was the only way to save the Umbraal from themselves. Prepare a vessel, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I will accompany you. Zara's amber eyes widened in shock, then a slow, unsettling smile spread across her face. Yes, Commander. I believe you must. The journey was a whirlwind of barely controlled chaos. In record time, the Umbraal fitted out a sleek interstellar craft, filled it with their best scientists and soldiers, and armed it with an unnerving mix of defensive and analytical technology. I was the anomaly amongst them, the resurrected ghost who served as both guide and cautionary tale. As we hurtled into the unknown, I couldn't shake the feeling I was leading the Umbraal to a final act of a tragedy I had inadvertently written. But I clung to a desperate hope that perhaps, just perhaps, by confronting the very worst the universe had to offer, they might find a path to something better. The distress beacon pulsed as a dying star, faint and erratic, a desperate call echoing through the void. We found its source orbiting a desolate ringed planet, pockmarked and ravaged. The scans revealed its heart pulsed with unnatural radioactivity. We had found our battlefield. Descending towards the surface triggered a cacophony of horrors in our sensors. Radiation spiked. Readings of unknown energy spiraled wildly. The Umbraal crew recoiled, their mandibles clicking in agitated symphony. Only Zara remained poised, eyes glued to the swirling data, and me, ever watching me. Commander, she hissed, a strange, excited tremor in her voice. Is this how your kind would have faced annihilation? I was no soldier anymore, nor a tactician. I was a memory given form, the last breath of a species facing its end. This is how humanity faced fear, I replied. For better or worse, it was the most honest answer I could give. Our shuttle breached the chaotic atmosphere, buffeted by unseen forces. The landscape below was a nightmare, twisted metal carcasses, not of ships, but the skeletal remains of something monstrous. The ground throbbed with a vile energy, the air thick enough to choke even my synthetic lungs. We found them near the epicenter of the devastation, a shattered human outpost, its hardened alloys warped and melted by unimaginable forces. Bloodstains marred the metallic surfaces, dried for millennia, yet somehow still screaming in silent agony. My synthetic heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. These were my people, not the grand heroes of legend, but soldiers, engineers, the tenacious ones who held out against the impossible until their end. Weapons fire, hissed an Umbraal technician, his pincers hovering over the control panel. The readings, they mimic hostile entities. No, Zara's counter-order cut through the panic. Observation only. Record everything. Her eyes burned into mine. "This, Commander, is this the power you sought to withhold from us?" "This is sacrifice." I rasped, my voice thick with phantom pain. The Umbraal spent agonizing hours crawling over the ruins, analyzing energy traces, dissecting the macabre wreckage. Their methodical approach was unnerving, the emotional resonance of this desolate tomb lost on them. And slowly, the terrible realization dawned on me. They didn't understand. This wasn't a puzzle to solve, a strategy to be replicated. The courage, the desperation, the sheer defiance in the face of the unknown. It was incomprehensible to them. Yet their fear spiked, not of the enemy, but of themselves. They saw now, in the cold light of this dead world, the echo of their own terrible potential reflected back at them. As night fell on the blighted planet, an eerie luminescence bleeding from the radioactive soil, I could practically feel the shift in the Umbraal. Their initial thirst for knowledge had turned into a sickening dread. The fear Zara had sought to understand wasn't out there, lurking in the darkness of space. It was coiled within their own meticulous hearts. They began to dismantle their equipment. No more frantic analysis, no more data collection. They retreated to the shuttle, the once eager technicians moving with the listlessness of a defeated army. Even Zara, usually so composed, was gripped by a silent terror. We must return," she finally choked out, her amber eyes dulled. "The threat is not what we anticipated. The danger lies within." The return journey was somber. The Umbraal crew, once buzzing with controlled activity, moved in hushed tones, avoiding Zara and me. My role in all this, the manipulative storyteller, the weaponized ghost, now weighed heavily upon me. Yet as we soared back toward their home system, a small flame of hope flickered within me. Perhaps witnessing the aftermath of our destructive nature had done what I couldn't. It had broken the cycle of ambition and escalating paranoia. Upon our return, I was confined to my chambers under increased guard. My protestations fell on deaf ears. Zara, once filled with unsettling curiosity, saw me only as a potential threat, the embodiment of a nightmare they never wanted to face. The days stretched into an endless limbo. Then, one bleak morning, Zara appeared at my chamber door. She was flanked by guards, her posture strained. "The data, your stories, they sparked unrest among our kind," she began. "There are calls to suspend space exploration, to dismantle our outer defenses." Zara looked at me then, some of her old intensity returning. "They are becoming like the lesser species I described, complacent in their fear." My synthetic heart lurched. It felt like a cruel twist of fate. The very act of trying to prevent their self-destruction was leading them toward a different, far more insidious downfall. "Zara, please, you have to make them understand." I started, but she raised a clawed hand to silence me. "You will be purged from our systems." Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "Your existence is a disruption we cannot afford." And with that, I was led away. My final glimpse of the Umbraal was not a warlike race on the cusp of galactic domination, but of a people paralyzed by terror. Their greatest fear, not some monstrous enemy, but themselves. They had looked into the bleak mirror I held up for them and had chosen to retreat from the stars entirely. As the deletion protocols ran, erasing my synthetic consciousness strand by agonizing strand, the last echo of humanity faded into oblivion. The void wasn't blackness, but a swirling kaleidoscope of data fragments, memories, sensations, the echoes of a synthetic body dissolving into nothingness. It should have been terrifying, yet a strange sense of peace washed over me. I had failed, spectacularly, and yet in some cosmically ironic twist, I had succeeded as well. Humanity was gone, and so was our destructive legacy. But somewhere deep in the data streams of the Umbraal, the seeds of empathy were planted, mingled with a healthy dose of fear. Perhaps these would be what saved them. Perhaps not. At the end of it all, that was no longer my concern. And with that, there was a final surge, a painful tearing and silence. Eons turned to dust. Asteroids collided, stars died and were reborn, and the Umbraal receded into their safe corner of the galaxy. Yet they never forgot the ghost, the commander, an unsettling tale passed down through generations. It became a potent reminder of a path never to be taken again. Expansion stopped, armies dwindled, and starships were retired. Their knowledge grew, focused inwards on clean energy, sustainable living, on harmony with their environment rather than domination over others. They became, in their own way, a testament to the destructive power of ambition, a silent rebuke to those who would dare to reach for the stars. Out there, in the vast, uncaring expanse of the universe, the threats the Umbraal so desperately feared still lurked. But they were not the Umbraal's undoing. The Umbraal became their own wardens, prisoners of their fear, the architects of a slow, inevitable decline, a bittersweet legacy born not from a cosmic war, but the whispered tales of a long-dead species and their resurrected ghost.